This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of B.C. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. It was, as the song goes, almost 20 years ago today that Sue Rodriguez was denied the opportunity to end her life the way she was choosing, which was an assisted suicide. She was denied that opportunity by the Supreme Court of Canada, so she went elsewhere to end her days in her chosen fashion. Well, the BC Supreme Court only 1 week ago has upheld that decision. However, that is hardly the end of this story, because the debate will continue to rage on, not only in public, but also in Parliament, and possibly again in the Supreme Court of Canada. Dr. Brian Finnemore is a member of both Right to Die Canada and Dying with Dignity, and he has done us a great favor and taken the boat over from Salt Spring. Great to see you, Dr. Brian. How did you get to this position in life? I'm not talking about being a doctor. I'm talking about being a guy from Dying with Dignity and Right to Die.
Well, it's because I was a doctor, partly.
Yes.
And had opportunity to see a number of people at their end of life.
Yes.
And some who died with equanimity, and others who died with a lot of pain and suffering and anxiety. And for those, I knew that there must be a better way.
Yes.
I think it might have been reinforced a little bit by my own mother. And many of the people that I know who have joined our kind of movement, it's because of some family experience. And my mother lived to be just under 100.
Wow.
But for the last 10 years of her life, because she was deaf, had outlived all her associates and whatnot, loved to do things for other people, but eventually became unable to do that. So life had no meaning for her. And so for the last 10 years of her life, she asked me several times if there wasn't something that I could do to help her end her life. And she was a very religious woman.
And was she in a lot of pain?
No, she was not in pain at all.
Yeah. But she felt without purpose.
Without purpose, that's right.
Was she mobile? Could she get around at all?
She got around with some difficulty, but she could get around.
Yeah.
But she just felt that her life had been fully lived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people, oddly enough, I think a great many of us are fortunate to know this is it, kids. I've pretty much had the biscuit.
Yeah. And then people make a request, but they are obliged to live on unless they deliberately decide to use some method to kill themselves.
Yes.
And it usually has to be done in some secretive manner, which is too bad.
Yeah, how widespread is the practice, in your experience here in Canada, of doctors just saying, okay, if you like, we can stop feeding you, or if you like, we can just crank up the narcotic feed a little, or how widespread is that?
I have no way really of knowing.
Yes.
And because I have practiced almost my entire practice life out in the boondocks, away from the big hospitals and whatnot, I really don't know what happens there. But
certainly you've seen this.
Oh, we do see it happen for sure, and I'm glad that it can happen. And I know there is this thing called terminal sedation, which is sometimes used as kind of a euphemism for a doctor-assisted suicide, if you will.
Yep.
Or euthanasia.
Yeah. I think one of the big issues as this subject continues to rage, and it does rage because I have here a ton of newspaper clippings, and half of them are letters to the editor.
Oh, yes.
So everybody's weighing in on this subject, as I think, as one would think they would, because what is more interesting and scarier and more volatile a subject than our own mortality?
That's right.
Yeah.
And up until recently, people were afraid to talk about death.
Yes.
It wasn't a subject that you'd hear in polite conversation.
Yeah.
It was a nasty D word.
Yeah, and also we have this peculiar thing happening today, especially in Canada, of not just an aging population, but a really aging population. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you died of an impacted wisdom tooth when you were 15, or you got run in by a broadsword or something.
Yeah.
You know, you went off to a war somewhere and got hacked to pieces. Today, it's not so unusual to have a mother who lives to 100.
Quite so.
Yeah.
And medical science has evolved so much that now they can extend your life
Yes.
and also extend the period it takes to die by months, by years.
Do you
So
think
instead of having a quick death, you can have a protracted death. You can be on all sorts of life support systems.
Do you think, have you reached a place where you think a lot of that is almost unnatural?
Absolutely. I
Really?
think it's all unnatural.
Yeah, really. Well, tell
Yeah.
me how
Well,
you perceive all of this.
There's a medical industry,
Yes.
and the medical industry pushes all this care, in my
Yes.
view,
Yes.
especially in the United States, where they have this very privatized system.
Yes.
And the hospitals like to keep their beds full, and the medical industry likes to sell their instruments and their tools and keep people
Yes.
on and on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind of horrendous, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah. Have you made out some sort of living will about your?
Absolutely.
What does it say?
It says, when I can no longer make a decision for myself,
Yes.
I do not wish to have any life-sustaining measures undertaken,
Yes.
and that includes intravenous fluids, antibiotics, CPR, et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So now there's a photo in the paper only 2 or 3 days ago of a gentleman in Toronto who has been in a coma for 3 years. And when you look at the photo, his eyes are open, but clearly he's not home.
Right.
You know, and his family has cheered the Supreme Court decision. This family really want to keep him alive. I mean, there's so many anomalies in this story. This is not a smooth path.
Absolutely not. And I would also support the Supreme Court decision, just because somebody has to make the choice.
Yes.
And we think that if you can't make it yourself, you have to designate somebody else to make it for you,
Yes.
knowing somebody who knows what your wishes might be, and that's what we call a substitute decision maker. And everybody should have one. And maybe legally, no member of that family was named substitute decision maker, but they have undertaken that role, and I think you have to respect their role.
So you puzzled me because I don't understand. On the one hand, you support the Supreme Court decision, but on the other, you are preaching for dying with dignity and the right to die.
But I'm also preaching for choice,
Aha.
and everybody should have the choice.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think one of the biggest issues that keeps coming up here are protocols and safeguards. I
Yes.
think so many people are rightly concerned that, you know, an avaricious nephew or something could say, well, let's get rid of Uncle Harry, enough of that, you know, because I'm in his will and I get the Mercedes.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. But Uncle Harry has to be the one to make the choice.
Yes.
And he has to be able to make it without influence of his family or anybody who has a vested interest in his demise. And so you have to have safeguards in place.
The father of a dear friend of mine from school, when he passed away, he was, you know, being attacked by some pretty serious physical circumstances, and he basically just said to the family and to his doctors, look, that's it. Don't do much else for me. I'm pretty much going, and I'm happy to go. I've had a life. It's been great. And so that's what happened.
So be it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And did he have a peaceful passing?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, which is so good.
Yeah. And he got to say goodbye to his children and his grandchildren and his wife and blah, blah, blah. And he said, look, this is the end of this story. I don't know what's coming up next, but this is the end of this one.
Sure.
You know? I mean, not a lot of people have that luxury.
And a lot of them don't need it, because death can still be a pretty natural
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
However, it's become less and less available as our technology develops. And so many people now die in hospitals,
Yes.
whereas they used to die at home.
Yeah. Yeah. So much happens in hospitals that used to happen at home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the protocols you would put in place? I mean, if you people often refer to countries like the Netherlands, and they say, well, you know, in the Netherlands they let people die. But if you examine the story, they're very thorough about the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just look at the a nearer, closer jurisdiction
Yes.
is Washington and Oregon.
Yes, Washington and Oregon.
Sure.
So what are those protocols like? What's the system like?
Well, the protocol is that the patient
Yes.
has to contact the family doctor, both in writing and orally, with their wishes.
Yes.
Have to have a life-threatening illness.
Yes.
There has to be a time interval between at least 2 appointments. If there's any question of a psychological aberration, they have to have a psychiatric consultation. A second physician needs to be involved. And then, if all those conditions are met, then the physician can give the patient a prescription for a lethal amount
Yes.
of a barbiturate, usually
Yes.
Nembutal.
Yes.
And then it's up to the patient, client, whatever we call him, as to whether he wants to get the prescription filled. And then it's up to him as to whether he wants to take it. So there's a lot of chances for not accessing.
A lot of opportunities to have
say
sober
no.
second thought.
Absolutely.
And say, yeah.
And what actually happens in both Washington and Oregon, where they keep detailed records,
Yes.
is that only about 65 to 70% of those who get the prescription actually take it.
Truly.
That's right.
Because?
Because they've chosen otherwise.
And why do you surmise that?
But, well, I think it's very reassuring for some people, especially with neurodegenerative disease like ALS, for example,
Yeah.
that they want to have the ability to end their life if things become interminable, unbearable.
Yes.
And just having that ability gives them enough peace of mind that they don't access it. They don't need the service.
Amazing. Okay, Dr. Brian Finnemore is our guest. We're going to take a little breather on this very serious, heavy subject, and gives you an opportunity to send us an email. davidberner.com is the site to go to. We always welcome your thoughts, and also gives us a chance for the lovely people who sponsor this program to say hello. Those are the folks who allow us to come to you here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back in a minute. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of B.C. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. We're talking about the right to die here in Canada, which is still an issue somewhat before the courts. And Dr. Brian Finnemore, a retired doctor who has spent most of his life working in rural areas, now lives in a sort of rural area at Salt Spring Island, and has graciously taken the boat over to visit us. The Dutch physician-assisted suicide system is highly meticulous, and controlled. So says this report.
And I quite agree. It is.
And it has to be.
It has to be, absolutely.
One of the, sorry, go ahead. You're going to
No.
say something?
I have nothing else
Oh,
to say.
one of the things you said is that they could be given a prescription for, what is it?
Barbiturate, and usually it's one called Nembutal.
Yeah, Nembutal. So when you said
But
that,
we're talking about Oregon and Washington. The Dutch use a different protocol.
when you said that, I suddenly pictured the pharmacist. And I was just thinking about the reaction of a pharmacist getting this and getting this script and going, huh?
Yes. Now, if I gave you a prescription for Nembutal,
Yes.
and you took it down to a pharmacy in Vancouver,
Yes.
they couldn't fill it because they don't have it on hand.
Really?
Yes, it's illegal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But in my early days of practice,
Yes.
it was commonly used as a sleeping pill.
Why is it
Nembutal,
illegal? Is it
Seconal.
an addictive? Is it?
No, it's because people can use it to end their lives.
So what would happen? Oh, so you couldn't get that prescription
No, you couldn't, not in BC right now,
yet.
at the moment.
You were saying during the break that there are not two groups, the right to die and dying with dignity, but four groups in addition to BC Civil Liberties, who of course are always involved in these things. Who are the other groups?
There's one in Quebec
Yes.
that is very much like our group, Dying with Dignity. And the other one's right here in British Columbia called the Farewell Foundation,
Ah.
founded basically by Russell Ogden, whom I'm sure you've
Yes.
heard about.
Yeah.
And their perspective is slightly different in
Yes.
that they don't believe that they're in the medical model. In other words, they don't feel that you have to go through a doctor to access life-ending processes.
They don't feel that you should have to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Not that you should have to. You're quite right.
Yeah.
Yes. And they will provide people who will be with you
Yes.
at the end, if you wish.
Yes.
And those people have to interview the subject with no relatives around
Why with no relatives around?
because they want to assure themselves that nobody is exerting an undue influence on the subject, such as you're suggesting.
Yeah, because somebody could do moral suasion or emotional blackmail or,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that group has been in existence for a little over 2 years now.
Yes.
I believe they have somewhat over 280 members,
Wow.
and you have to be a member to access their services.
Yeah, I would think that would be because we believe so much in medicine. You know, medicine is such a pillar of our culture that I think that they must have a real uphill battle, you know, to want to let people die without medical intervention.
Yes.
That's a real tough one.
Mm-hmm.
What was your take finally on Dr. Kevorkian?
Well, he was a flamboyant individual.
Sure.
He certainly brought the issue a lot of attention.
Yeah.
For that, I applaud him.
Yeah.
But for his methodology
Yes.
and the fact that the timing between when he would decide to help somebody and do the act
Yes.
was very brief often, and you wondered how thoroughly he had gone into the circumstances, and could there have been another way?
Yeah.
You know, we are not advocating willy-nilly widespread assistance in dying. It's only for certain selected cases.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was my next sort of journey of inquiry in this conversation, the widespread word. You know, now we're thinking about legalizing marijuana and other substances and so on. And of course, one of the issues people say, well, won't that encourage more people, blah, blah, blah. So have you had people fight with you, argue with you that the moment you somehow legalize assisted suicide, you'll have people dropping like flies?
Well, we talk about the slippery slope.
Yes,
sort of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
one would be obliged to ask them why they thought there would be a slippery slope. And is there not a way to control things as we control things now to prevent that from happening? And you can look at the experience in Oregon, for example, where they've had this legislation in place for 15 years.
Yes.
And documented everything about it, about every case. And there's no slippery slope. And then they say...
They've had very few people make this choice.
That's right.
Yes.
Actually, statistically, it was 0.25% of all the people dying in Oregon. I think that was the statistics.
Yeah, so it seems to me, I mean, my experience, I'm going to be 71 in about 3 weeks. My experience in life is, Doc, that even if your brain is going funny, even if you've been given a lot of medications and so on, there is a DNA, there's a message built in to all living creatures to survive. You know, so the death wish is pretty, you know, it may show up in all human beings for 4 seconds once or 4 times, but there's a basic drive that says stay alive.
For most people.
For most people,
Right.
at most times.
That's right.
So I don't see if suddenly assisted suicide were somehow legalized. I don't see people suddenly, oh, that's for me.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
No.
most people would have zero interest, less than zero interest.
Although, you know, when I was coming over here on the
Yes.
ferry for a few minutes, I started to think about how many people in my circle
Yes.
had committed suicide.
Ouch.
And just like that, I counted up 6.
No.
That's right. No.
Yeah, over a lengthy period
yeah,
of time.
I'm 81 years old.
Yeah.
So over
You are
those
81
years,
years old?
well, in a few days.
Shut up.
Yeah.
You are not. Is he 81? You're pulling my leg.
I'm not pulling your leg. I wish I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
over a lifetime,
And a
6
couple
people.
were my medical colleagues.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a guy commit suicide when I was actively being a therapist and very active in the community, and he jumped out of a window at the VGH, and he was an active therapist, and our names were almost identical, and people thought it was me.
Oh,
and
really?
I'd run into people 2 years later, and they go, "Oh,
yeah.
I thought you killed yourself." Not yet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You had that ghostly look about you.
Yes. So 6 out of a lifetime.
So it happens.
It happens. Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. If you were king for a day, if you had a magic wand, how would you make the system work? What would you do with this? What would you do with the Supreme Court or whatever's necessary? What kind of a system would we visit if it were the world according to Dr. Bryan?
Well, everybody, if they chose,
Yes.
would have access to the conditions around their end of their life,
Yes.
and not necessarily to have them ended artificially, but they should have access. They should be able to decide. They should have the autonomy to make the choice as to whether they want their life ended or not, because sometimes they have unbearable suffering.
Yes.
And that unbearable suffering can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be existential. And you or I cannot really evaluate somebody else's suffering. Only they know how much suffering they've got.
It's very interesting you say that you included in that list existential, which is a subtle idea, but I understand. And if someone is at a point of existential suffering where they don't appear to be terribly suffering, but they just feel this emptiness, and how do they explain to their spouse or their adult children, kids, it's all gone?
Yeah. And life becomes an unbearable burden.
Yes.
See, we were taught in medical school that death was the enemy.
Yes, yes.
But in my view,
Yes.
death is not the enemy. Everybody's going to die sooner or
Right,
later.
right.
Death can often be the friend. You know, there are some conditions that death is the only thing that will relieve.
Have you witnessed in your lifetime families arguing with someone in a hospital bed?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
Arguing to keep people alive.
Someone in the bed is saying, "That's it for me," and they're saying, "No, don't do it, don't do it."
It's usually somebody who's come from afar.
Ah,
And the local caregivers,
yes,
the local family members,
yes.
have agreed with Uncle Joe or whatever, that there's going to be no further measures.
Yeah.
And then the cousin who hasn't seen Uncle Joe for 6 years comes out and, oh, we've got to do everything.
Yeah.
And that is not an uncommon happening. And it's distressing.
And it's all this mad struggle that we all have
It is.
dealing with the subject.
Absolutely.
And you have to ask what Joe's issue is. You know, maybe
Yes.
Joe's just not good at accepting death. You know,
Well,
if
I
anybody is.
think it's a lot of guilt from a distant relative who suddenly comes back
Yes.
and feels guilty about having paid no attention to the loved
Yeah.
one.
Suddenly he's going to be the savior.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Brian, look, thanks so much for coming over.
Well,
It's such an important subject, and we'll stay on top of it. you know.
I certainly appreciate the opportunity to have talked about it
Yeah.
and entered into this discussion, and the fact that you're
Did you have-
interested is great.
Did you have this rally, or is it about to happen?
The rally's on the 2nd of November.
2nd of November?
Yes.
On the steps of the ledge?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. We'll
It's
see.
International Right to Die Day.
Oh, International Right to Die Day. Maybe I'll go swimming.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Doctor.
you very much.
Great to see you. Okay, that's it, folks. Great subject. So next week, I'm going to be doing something else next week, so I'm not going to be in the building. So we're going to run a repeat, and we're going to repeat the show with Jesse Joel, who represents Hillcrest Community Center, and they're fighting with, they are one of 6 community centers saying to the park board, leave us alone, we're doing fine, we've been doing this for 100 years, we can manage our affairs. It's a very interesting story. Thanks for being with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.